Hello and welcome to What It Takes. I'm Tom Landon. Those of us of a certain age remember certain images when it comes to cigarettes. The Marlboro Man, a cartoon camel, even men and women with black eyes saying they'd, quote, rather fight than switch to any brand but Terrytons. In 1998, 52 state and territory attorney generals signed an agreement with Big Tobacco that, among other things, created a very successful anti-smoking campaign. And today, the numbers of kids smoking cigarettes are way down compared to before the settlement. Unfortunately, e-cigarettes have in many ways filled the void, and almost 15% of high school kids today report vaping, and we know that habits formed in youth are hard to break. My guest today is a nationally known expert. Mimi Boublik is a founding partner of PAVe, Parents Against Vaping and E-Cigarettes. She's here today to help us understand the scope of the problem and talk about ways to prevent our kids from vaping. She joins me via Zoom from New York. Mimi, welcome.
Thank you so much, Tom. Thanks for having me.
I'm so glad that that we connected, and I think the parents' perspective is so important on this topic. So, but before we talk about the specifics of the problem, what led you into this work, and just in terms of your biography, what made you follow this path?
Yeah, well, it's a great question. I mean, I think the main reason is because it got personal for me. I grew up in a generation of smokers, my parents, my grandparents, et cetera. But I feel like we did such a great job in our country and our families of creating values around not smoking with our kids, and our kids did not smoke. And then in an instant, in 2018, everything changed. And my 17-year-old daughter, I discovered she was vaping e-cigarettes, and I said, "What is this? And do you have any idea what it is?" She said, "Well, it's totally safe, Mom. It's flavored water." And I thought, "Oh, well, that's interesting." And so I started to do a little digging, and then I attended an educational event. I think one of the very first ones that Parents Against Vaping e-cigarettes did, and I discovered it wasn't flavored water. In fact, it's really harmful chemicals. Nicotine addiction is real. This is incredibly potent addiction for kids. And so I dove down the rabbit hole. I joined the three founders who had just founded that fall of 2018. And I said, "Take me with you. I'm in this fight with you. Tell me what I can do." And so that's really how it started for me. And now I'm primarily working with PAVe on education, but we also, and we do, and I'll explain a little bit, but we do advocacy and education across the country. And I primarily focus on the education for adults.
And I should say there are several organizations in your space, but yours is most focused on parents, and I think that's a really helpful thing. So in terms of the organization, clearly you got involved because you were a concerned parent. Was that true for the other founders of PAVe?
Yeah, well, the origin story of PAVe is even more crazy and almost unbelievable, but it did happen. In 2018, in the fall of 2018, the three founders' sons were all in 9th grade in one school. And that school had speakers come in to talk about anti-addiction subjects. And unbeknownst to the school, a third party hired a Juul representative to come into the classroom. And when the teachers left the room so that the kids could ask questions, the Juul representative identified himself and basically said that Juul was, quote, totally safe and about to be approved by the FDA. Now, many of the kids in that classroom were extremely relieved because, to hear totally safe was a big relief, because many of them were already vaping and some of them were already quite addicted. So when the founders' sons went home that day and told the parents this kind of confusing and mixed message conversation that they had, they were furious, frankly, and started to do a little digging and realized that a Juul representative had, in fact, infiltrated the school. And this started the founders on a journey both in advocacy and education. They founded PAVe really because they were looking for adult resources for parents, and they realized that there weren't any. So they decided to create, a website and provide some resources for parents, not realizing that we would, in a few years, become really the national parent voice, working to protect youth from the predatory practices of big tobacco. And we are all volunteers. I mean, we hire people, but in case people wonder, because people say, "Well, you're in it for the money," which is sort of funny because none of us are getting paid. We do this because we truly believe that, we represent the millions of families whose lives have been truly upended by this vaping epidemic.
I mean, there are so many parallels here when I hear you talk about both the early ads in the 50s where doctors were
Absolutely.
recommending cigarettes, but also when you think about pharmaceutical sales and just where the technology or the product gets out way ahead of those who would, if you're always playing catch up, right?
Definitely. Absolutely.
So
And it wasn't accidental, by the way. These are the same companies. This is big tobacco, right? And so they use the same playbook to market to our kids, unbeknownst to adults, through social media, which did not exist 50 years ago. So it was a very nefarious way of getting to our kids where parents weren't looking, right? And then eventually that marketing, if you look at it, look, they say that they were trying to help adult smokers get off of combustible cigarettes, right, and find a healthier alternative. But the reality is that they were targeting our kids. And if you look at their early marketing, it's all people who look like my daughter, the big ponytail and the midriff, shirts, and very cool. And they were going for cool. I mean, if you look at their materials, their marketing materials, they were going for cool in their vaporized campaign, which was their original campaign that Juul had. And, then they stepped back and said, oh, wait, we're not trying to target kids.
We didn't mean to do what we
didn't mean
doing.
to do that. But it was too late, because the marketing already went viral and kids were doing the marketing for them. If you look on social media, there are all these amazing, cool looking kids with their plume competitions and things like that. So it was being done. And they were also, frankly, sponsoring events, handing out free starter kits at, events where young people are. So this was, believe it, it's not accidental.
Right. I should probably back up just a little bit for somebody who has not paid attention to this at all. What is an e-cigarette and how does it work?
Oh, that's a really good question. So an e-cigarette basically takes a liquid, we call it e-liquid, which in most cases, unfortunately, is a flavored e-liquid. And it heats it to a high degree through inhaling on it. It starts the heating process. There are chemicals that convert the liquid to aerosol, which are propylene glycol and glycerol. And unfortunately, those two chemicals are not really safe for our kids to be inhaling. And there's just so much bad in it. But the flavored e-liquid is heated, inhaled into the lungs, and these products contain a lot of nicotine. So in one single cartridge of Juul or a disposable device, most of these devices contain 1 to 2 packs of cigarettes worth of nicotine. And that's really important to understand. It's also, unfortunately, and when I say packs, it's cigarettes, right? So 1 to 2 packs of cigarettes worth of nicotine. It's also a different form of nicotine that Juul used and others have followed, which is nicotine salts, which is almost like a freebase of nicotine. It hits the bloodstream more quickly, hits the brain more quickly, gets this nice head rush that kids describe. This is alluring. This is a dopamine, response in the brain that becomes the sort of addiction, taking over the brain. And eventually, unfortunately, many kids will become dependent on the nicotine. The problem with nicotine, first of all, they say it's one of the most addictive substances on the planet and very, very hard to quit. Most of our public health advocates, talk about how difficult nicotine is. But nicotine salts especially, it's hitting the brain very quickly. And unfortunately, over time, when kids use it, they start to need more and more nicotine just to feel that normal sense that they always felt. And then when they stop using it, they get anxious, and it can create a level of anxiety and sometimes depression as well. This
is so similar to what we hear about coming off of prescription medicines. And we do know, I mean, my father was a 2-pack a day guy until his heart attack. Always said he would quit smoking when he had his heart attack. He did, but he has always said that was the hardest thing he ever did. And now you're amping it up even more. So you've got these chemicals inside of these cartridges. I know that 85% is the number I read that of kids who are vaping are using flavored e-cigarettes. And what are some of these flavors and what do you know about that?
Well, there are all sorts of flavors, and their names are very kid-friendly, like gummy worm, and they use characters like they did in the old days with, I remember the Fred Flintstone ads with cigarettes. There are all sorts of mint and menthol and all these fruity flavors. Again, as you mentioned, Tom, most kids who start vaping start with flavored products, which is why we're advocating to get all flavored products off the market, not just e-cigarettes, but frankly, all tobacco flavors, because that's what kids really initiate into. And we believe that if the flavors were removed, it would really remove the temptation for most kids. So that is a real priority for us. And we've been advocating across the country for changes in the laws, on the federal, state, and local levels, frankly. But yeah, the other issue with the e-cigarettes is that unlike a cigarette, cigarettes, you have to go outside to smoke them now. They have a noxious smell. You can tell when someone's been smoking. E-cigarettes are very discreet, and for kids, it's really easy to use. They keep it in their pockets. We've heard of kids, unfortunately, having to keep them under their pillows at night because they can't get through a night, or they want to wake up in the morning knowing that they have their vape. They're very easy to conceal. They're super inexpensive, and they are very potent, unfortunately, for kids.
At what age? I know there are materials for all ages of kids, but there is a big jump between like middle school and high school. When are kids most vulnerable to this, and what do we know about the ages of kids who are vaping?
Unfortunately, I think because of the fruity flavors, and it's become very normalized in our society now. Kids are smoking or vaping as young as 9, 10 years old. Basically, by the time they hit middle school, they have seen vapes around. They're vaping. There's vaping going on in their bathrooms, and probably among perhaps older siblings, older friends. So it has become more normalized in our society, unfortunately. So, I would say in terms of talking to kids, I think we need to start really early, just like we did with cigarettes, right? But
sure, and hopefully catching up on that. What are some of the short and long-term health implications for kids who are using e-cigarettes?
Yeah, so I think if I had 1 minute on this interview, I would say to parents that these products are harmful to youth. We don't tell adults what to do. Adults' brains and bodies are developed. We really don't we don't study the science. I mean, we do, but we don't really talk about the science of what's happening to adults. But we know these products are harmful to youth. First of all, brains continue to develop well into 20s. And unfortunately, the nicotine reward pathway, once the reward pathway is hijacked by the nicotine, it has implications for sometimes permanent cognitive function, diminishing cognitive functions such as working memory, processing speed, impulse control. And so the nicotine is really harming the developing brain. And also, we hear about gateway drugs, but truly nicotine is a gateway drug. And not only do many kids go on to smoke cigarettes after they vape, and we've found that I believe it's 4 or 5 times more likely to smoke cigarettes if you vape. But also kids sometimes go on to use more stronger drugs. And we've heard very often that kids will sort of, at night, nicotine is a stimulant. So at night they might have trouble sleeping. So they use THC to come down from their nicotine highs. So, it's not good. We've heard many reports of seizures among kids. This is basically nicotine poisoning. But beyond these like dramatic things that we've heard of lung transplants and, real issues with organs and seizures, there are just general day-to-day issues that happen. The nicotine, the chemicals and the aerosol are causing inflammation in the lungs. This is very harmful for kids. As the brain continues to develop, the lungs continue to develop. We've heard even farther, well into the 20s and even the 30s. So it's really not good for developing lungs. It has impact on the heart, the cardiovascular system. Nicotine is a stimulant, so it gets the heart going, can create palpitations and irregular heartbeat, and also affects the cardiovascular system and other organs. So there is nothing good about it. Aside from the nicotine, these chemicals that are flavoring additives and other chemicals in the vapes are harmful. Many of them are toxic chemicals. Many of them some are even carcinogens. And the thing about these products is you might read some of the ingredients and say, well, these are food additives, but food additives have not been tested to mix with other chemicals, heat at high degrees, and inhale into the lungs. That has not been proven safe. So there's just really nothing good about these, to be honest with you. And as our pulmonologist friends always tell us, the only thing kids should be inhaling is air. So.
Well, and in an earlier conversation, you mentioned that, you know, some parents actually have the misconception that it's better for their kid to vape than to smoke cigarettes. Since I have you here and there are parents watching, some of whom who might have that opinion, you know, what do you say to those parents?
You know, so I'm not going to say whether you should be buying cigarettes or vapes for your kid. I think if it, you know, I would just say, basically, none of these products are good for kids. They all have issues, some of the same issues and some different or new issues, right? And it's going to be, we know some of the health harms of vaping in terms of lung impairment and cardiovascular impairment and brain impairment. But, you know, our pulmonologist experts are saying it's going to be years, just like it was with the cigarette industry, to truly understand the full health harms of these. And it could be decades, well into, you know, once kids hit their 30s and 40s. But we know right now that they are not safe, especially for developing brains and developing bodies. But I would say neither are good. I'm not going to, you know, make an opinion.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. I understand that. As a former school administrator and with a person with a lot of school administrator friends, they have talked about how this really caught them by surprise, much like it did you and members of your organization, but also how hard it is to enforce because of the ability for kids to use these in an almost undetectable way. What do you know about that? And what are some things that schools can do? Because you think you send your kid off to school, they're in a safe environment, and we hope they are. But these administrators and teachers are really fighting this battle over what goes on in the bathroom, but also sometimes what goes on in classrooms.
No, 100%. I mean, they're very easy. Like I said, they're so easy to use and conceal. They have a smell, but it's sort of a sweet smell. In fact, that's how I missed the signs with my own child, because I smelled some sweetness, but I thought it was just perfume or something, but it was actually the aerosol product that's coming off of, you know, out of the air and sticking onto the clothes and the hair. So, you know, I think it is frustrating. I think one of the things that has been really challenging for schools and school administrators is that punishment really doesn't work, especially when kids have an addiction, right? And we know with this mental health crisis, more and more kids are using substances to self-medicate. And so what we're trying to help parents and schools understand is that the punishment really isn't the answer, that we have to find other solutions, including treatment, helping them with cessation, helping them understand the health harms, and also, frankly, helping the parents understand, because, you know, we have heard parents coming in and demanding their kids' vapes back that were confiscated. And, you know, so that's why the education is so important. I think parents don't yet understand the health harms to kids of these products. And frankly, there are products out there now they call them wellness vapes, which is these non-nicotine vapes that are being marketed to our kids as well, you know, to help you sleep better and help you focus and help you calm down and relax. They have different vitamins in them. But the reality is that even though the nicotine is not there, many of the other chemicals still are. And these products are not safe for kids. These have not been approved by the FDA. And they're simply not safe. They have many of the same chemicals. So we are urging parents to talk to their kids about those non-nicotine vapes as well. And they're being sold at Urban Outfitters and other places where our kids shop. So we have to be sure to educate them as well.
Yeah, and that was a question just quickly, like where do kids get their vapes? I mean, I guess the gas station. I mean, where are they getting these?
So this is the heartbreaking part. You know, different states have different laws, right? So I live in New York City, and thankfully we were able to get a flavor ban passed a number of years ago. However, the enforcement issue has been very challenging across the country. So even if the laws are there, sometimes the enforcement is not. And in fact, we started a program that we were piloting in New York City called Poison, which is parents opposing the illegal sale of nicotine, which really just empowers parents to report stores who are either selling illegal products or selling products that might be legal, but selling them to youth, or frankly, selling without a license, which many states have. So they are really easy to get, unfortunately. Many younger kids might buy them through friends or siblings. We've heard of people still buying them online, even though really there's supposed to be a lot of restrictions. We know that kids are still getting them.
Well, we know you can buy you can buy anything online,
yes,
right?
Anything. And unfortunately, many stores are not enforcing the age restriction. I used to send my younger son into stores to say, hey, go see if you can buy a vape. And he was not turned down. Stores want the money, right? They're not really concerned about the product, what the harms are to kids. And of course, many are doing the right thing, I'm sure, but there are many who are not.
There are enough who are not.
They're very, very accessible.
We've still got several minutes left, but I wanted to, you have a great checklist on your website of things to look for. And I think now that we've kind of got parents concerned who are home watching this, I want to go through these. So what should parents look for? The first one that you list is a secretive attitude. I mean,
yeah.
How do you tell whether your teenager has a secretive attitude about vaping or something else?
So true. I mean, part of the problem is that some of the signs of vaping are really signs of just being a teenager, right?
Right.
Bursts of anger. I mean, what parent hasn't experienced that, right? So I think one of the things is sort of, if you notice a change in your child's behavior, things that are not typical. So if they're secretive, then maybe they'll, you can't really tell. But basically also wanting to be where you're not sometimes is a sign. If you're on vacation with them, for example, and they feel like, you seem like they're leaving to go to the bathroom a lot or leaving where you are, that could be a sign that they are trying to, that they have a dependency.
Sure. We know our kids. So if they're acting differently than normal, a
but
sweet
also
smell,
that sweet odor.
You've mentioned that sweet odor a couple times. I guess it's not just on their body, but you could sniff their backpack. You could sniff, where they've been.
Yes, and I would check their backpacks and check their things. These devices are first of all, know what the devices look like. We have some pictures on our website because they are constantly changing, but they look like things other than vapes. They can look like highlighters. They can look like flash drives. They look like a lot of things. So just knowing what they are. Also, if your child is opening the window in the middle of the winter or putting incense in the room, if your child has trouble sleeping where they hadn't normally, because again, the nicotine is a stimulant, so it can make it really hard to sleep. To go to sleep. If you notice mood swings and anxiety and bursts of anger that haven't been there necessarily, this can be a sign, especially if you're with them and they are having some withdrawal symptoms. If you notice a change of appetite, we call it nixic. Too much nicotine makes kids not, hungry. And also one I missed, which is in my kid, which was the dry cough, this raspy cough that I couldn't figure out. I thought it was allergies. I just couldn't. And then looking back on it, I realized I missed it. And finally, with all the paying apps now, check what your kids are spending. If they have Venmo or any of these apps, ask the questions. What is this for? What are you using it for? And, have a discussion with them and be open and non-judgmental if they talk about it with you. That's really important.
I think, like everything else, communication is the key. Your kid, even though they're changing, their lives are changing, their friends are changing, their bodies are changing. It's still so important to have those conversations with them. And I think the spending, especially now, it is not that difficult if your child is using e-payments and you have access to it. You can track that a little bit. We've got just a couple minutes left. What are some of the most effective ways to help kids stop if they're using?
So unfortunately, there are plenty of adult cessation methods like patches and other products that doctors will recommend. There are not really great ones for kids yet. However, if your child you suspect has a dependency on nicotine, what I would say is a couple of things. One is talk to the doctor, talk to the pediatrician. And if they're dismissive of it, press them, because still there are some pediatricians who don't quite understand the health harms yet. There are doctors who will prescribe patches and other adult products. They will just, tailor them for the child. Also, you might want to think about therapy, because there may be some cognitive behavioral therapy that kids need. There are also probably local resources, state and local resources in your area on prevention and cessation that might be helpful. And then finally, along with all of these other resources, Truth Initiative has a texting app called This Is Quitting. And this, I think, is a nice supplement, because, it actually has a child one and a parent one. And I went on it to see how it was. And it's, AI driven, but it really does talk kids through it. If they're having a tough day, it gives them, kind of support. And I do think it's really helpful, and it's been proven effective across the country.
Well, thank you for that. And we are going to be talking to people locally about this issue too, to make sure we're covering our bases there. I just want to thank you for taking the time to join me today. Today's program is one of a series of episodes we're producing in the partnership with the Virginia Department of Education to help parents understand the dangers of e-cigarettes and other vices that can impact our children. And I thank you, Mimi, for joining me today to help shine a light on this important topic. If you have a child who's using e-cigarettes, or you want to be prepared to prevent that, the PAVe website has an amazing collection of resources.
And if you want to get involved, please reach out to us. We would love to help you on the local level as well. So.
All right. Thank you so much. And we've got your website up on the screen. Thank you so much for your time. I'm Tom Landon for What It Takes.